Using your smart speaker for this,
Okay, I've added cheese to your shopping list.
yeah, that's pretty smart. But shopping online with SuperValue? That's even smarter. Have the best produce hand-picked and delivered straight to your door. Download the SuperValue app now or shop online at supervalue.ie.
Onto your headphones and pour your favorite beverage. It's time for the Kickin or Stickin Fantasy Football Podcast. Now, fresh off the sidelines, your host, Matt McPeak.
Fantasy freaks and geeks, what is up? Welcome to the Week 8 edition of the Kickin or Stickin Fantasy Football Podcast. I am the host, Matt McPeak. Thank you for joining me tonight. We got 4 teams on bye here in Week 8. The Washington football team, the Cardinals, the Jaguars, and the Texans. I'm going to keep this episode under a half hour if it's the last thing I do. So, our first game of the week, we got the Steelers at the Ravens. Why this game is at 1 o'clock while the Cowboys-Eagles game is Sunday Night Football, I do not know, but the Steelers wide receiver merry-go-round, if you will, was spinning again last week. Deontay Johnson saw 15 targets. Juju saw 14. And James Washington and Chase Claypool each only saw 1. It was definitely good to see Juju get back involved, and I think we just start all of them besides James Washington, really, and take the good games with the bad. It's not just wide receiver that the Steelers like to mess up with us fantasy owners. We got Benny Snell. Benny Snell got another handful of goal line carries last week. Connor still had a pretty solid game, but he did drop a touchdown. Connor is still number 1 running back, though, with all these injuries. This year is insane, but it sucks seeing those goal line carries go to Snell. For the Ravens, Mark Ingram is dealing with an ankle injury, so we'll see if he's limited at all. If he is to miss this game, J.K. Dobbins would vault up to a RB1, even against this really tough Steelers run defense. Lamar Jackson just automatically adds about a half yard to, if not a full yard, of rushing to every running back's average yards per carry, just him being on the team. We're starting Mark Andrews. We're starting Marquise Brown. That's pretty much it. The next game, Rams at Dolphins. Tua Tagovailoa is going to start this game. It's going to be interesting to see how the targets get distributed. Yeah, it's a good word. Distributed with Tua at QB. I'm guessing they're going to want to lean on the running game, but the Rams D is pretty good. Myles Gaskins has been very consistent in the passing game, which makes him enticing here, but I just don't know if we can expect the same 3 to 4 targets a week with Tua at quarterback. With so many injuries at running back, like I said, you got these 4 teams on bye. I guess we're still calling Myles Gaskins a start. Mike Gesicki has been extremely frustrating. Didn't catch either of his 2 targets last week. It was week 6, right? They last played. They were on bye last week, so Gesicki did nothing. Meanwhile, Adam Shaheen and Durham Smith, maybe, both scored. I'm hoping the Dolphins took some time during the bye to focus on getting Gesicki more involved. I think I'm going to give it another week or 2 with Gesicki to see how Tua does, and then if it doesn't look like they're growing any kind of chemistry, I think it might be honestly time to just cut Gesicki because he's been one of the biggest pains in the ass for us fantasy owners at the tight end position. Next, we got the Jets at the Chiefs. This game opened at a 20.5-point spread. If Jamison Crowder is healthy, he's really the only Jet worth starting. Maybe Denzel Mims in a 12-team league, but I'm not counting on the rookie. And on the other side of this game, you pretty much start anyone that's in a Chiefs uniform because they should completely dominate this game. Next, we got the Vikings at the Packers. Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams. This duo in week 1 beat the living crap out of the Vikings. Devontae caught 14 of his 17 targets for 156 yards and 2 touchdowns last week. Devontae Adams had 13 catches on 16 targets for 196 yards and 2 touchdowns. Can Devontae Adams keep this going for another massive game against the Vikings? I think he can. Jamal Williams played great without Aaron Jones last week. Had over 100 total yards, and he scored. If Jones is out again this week, Williams will again be a must-start running back. Robert Tonyan, only 32 yards on 2 catches last week, while Jace Sternberger only target came in the end zone. The Vikings have allowed 2 touchdowns to tight ends this year, but they have allowed the 10th most receiving yards to tight ends. I think they've given up the most receiving yards per reception, so I expect the Packers to take a shot or two with Tonyan down the field. I might look at Tanyan's longest reception prop because he's definitely he's more of a deep threat type of tight end than he is a short range target. Vikings are coming off a bye. Not sure if Dalvin Cook will be playing or not. If Alexander Madison got his chance in Week 6, but only gave us 2.5 yards per carry. The Falcons' run D has been pretty good this year, but it was a massive disappointment. Whichever Vikings running back doesn't get the start, they're worth a start because. Whichever Vikings running back does get the start, they're worth starting for your fantasy team because the Packers' run D has been horrible this year. Only question is how much work does that Vikings running back get? Because the Packers, I think, are going to jump out to an early start, and I don't know how much they're really going to be able to run the ball. Adam Thielen's touchdown production this year has been pretty crazy, tied for the most touchdowns this year. So we're starting him, and we're starting the rookie. Justin Jefferson has been one of the most productive rookies, if not the most productive rookie at wide receiver, especially. Chase Claypool's been close, but Jefferson has about 200 more receiving yards on 10 more catches than Claypool. I think Jefferson has become a must-start. He's playing pretty damn good. Next game, we got the Colts at the Lions. With the Colts coming off a bye, I think they look at this bad Lions run defense and they let their offensive line just dominate this game. I think Jonathan Taylor has a huge game. These two teams have seen the fewest tight end targets this year, 16 for Detroit, 17 for Indianapolis, but the Lions have surrendered 2 touchdowns while the Colts are one of only 2 teams that have not allowed a tight end to score this year. So if I'm playing any tight ends this game, I'm playing Trey Burton. Mo Alley Cox has 2 touchdowns and the most receiving yards between the 3 Colts tight ends, but Burton has the most targets, and he's been the one that's coming on most recently. So I think Burton is probably the best athlete of the 3 as well when you're talking Mo Alley Cox and Jack Doyle. TJ Hawkinson does have a touchdown in each of his last 3 games, but like I said, I think that streak is going to die here in Week 8 because the Colts are really tough against tight ends. So next game, Raiders at Browns. I hit on Josh Jacobs' under for rushing yards last week against that nasty Buccaneers run defense. I think he's gonna. I think he gets going again this week. Only 4 teams have allowed more rushing yards, more rushing touchdowns than the Bears. Jesus, they're playing the Browns here. Only 4 teams have allowed more rushing touchdowns than the Browns, so it looks good for Josh Jacobs. They did just hold Giovanni Bernard to under 3 yards per carry, but Giovanni Bernard is not Josh Jacobs, so don't get discouraged by Josh Jacobs' last game. That Buccaneers run defense is disgusting, and I will be looking at the under for Devontae Freeman's rushing yards this week as well. I'll pretty much be looking at that every week against the Buccaneers. Henry Ruggs continues to be a very boom or bust guy, which is a whole bunch of busts and not really too many booms, really only that one boom week, really. So I'm not starting him. Obviously, Darren Waller is their top target getter and probably the guy Derek Carr trusts the most. But Aguilar had the same amount of targets last week as Darren Waller, and he doubled the yardage. So plus, he scored a touchdown. Aguilar now has a touchdown in each of his last 3 games. He's got a touchdown in 4 of their 6 games. The Browns have given up the 3rd most receiving yards to tight ends, so I'll give Nelson Aguilar another shot here. I think Hunter Renfrow could also have a good game. We just saw Tyler Boyd light up the Browns defense from the slot. I think Renfrow will run a lot of those same kind of routes, so he might be a guy I use as a cheap DFS option, and maybe I'll take a look at his reception props as well. Titans at Bengals, considering they were down by 20 points at one point, Derrick Henry still had a pretty good game last week against the Steelers. The Bengals have allowed the fourth most rushing yards this year, so Derrick Henry should have a field day in this game. The Bengals have also given up the 10th most receiving yards to wide receivers, with the third most explosive pass plays allowed. So that's a pass play of 15 yards or more. So A.J. Brown is also a must start. The Bengals have allowed the third most receiving yards to tight ends as well. So pretty much they're just giving it up to everybody. They gave up 3 touchdowns to Harrison Bryant and David Njoku last week. So I'm going to keep playing Jonnu Smith, even though it hasn't really been all that great of a year for him. Next up, Patriots at Bills. The Bills have been struggling for weeks now. They still beat the Jets last week, but that's not really saying much. I honestly don't know if I can start any running backs in this game at all. Singletary only gets 10 to 12 touches a game if he's lucky. Zach Moss was the better running back last week, but they will both have their weeks. Damian Harris isn't getting enough touches, and James White only had 1 target last week in a game that they were trailing the entire time. So that, I think, was the biggest disappointment out of everybody from the Patriots, was the fact that James White was only targeted 1 time. I think the only legit fantasy option in this game really is Stephon Diggs, and even he scares me because we all know the Patriots will always try and take away what you do best. Right now, Stephon Diggs is the best player on that offense, so it's looking like a pretty barren fantasy day up there in Buffalo. Chargers at the Broncos. Donald Parham, my boy. So I called Donald Parham's touchdown last week, but like a greedy bastard, I had to put him on a same-game parlay with Mike Williams over receiving yards of 41.5 instead of just sticking him in the tight end touchdown parlay, like an idiot. And it did not work out for me on either of those tickets. So, but it's obvious that the Chargers really like their tight ends. And Virgil Green, one of their 3 tight ends, went down with a really ugly ankle injury. If you're like me and you've sprained both of your ankles and broke one of them, it sucks seeing these dudes blow out ankles, but this guy, it was pretty gnarly. He caught a touchdown on the play, so that's got to make him feel slightly better. But so it's going to be just Hunter Henry and my boy Donald Parham. Hunter Henry did not have a good game last week, even though the Jaguars are one of the best matchups for tight ends. And my man, the XFL standout Donald Parham, I'll probably be rolling the dice with Parham every week the Chargers have a plus tight end matchup. So if I look and the team that they're playing is in the top third of the league as far as touchdowns allowed to tight ends, I'm going to throw Donald Parham on a ticket and see what happens because I think he was like plus 380 last week. So that it's nice. It's a nice payout if it hits, and I think it's going to hit more often than it's not against these teams that are not good at defending tight ends. The sky is just massive. Next, we got the 49ers at the Seahawks. Carlos Hyde has a special game here. Why?
Revenge.
Yes. And this might be a pretty heavy workload kind of game for Carlos Hyde because Chris Carson left last week's game with a foot injury, and he's week to week as of right now. He most likely is going to miss this game. Travis Homer is also at risk of being out because of a knee injury. So most likely we're looking at Carlos Hyde and the rookie DJ Dallas. It's going to be tough sledding, though. The 49ers have allowed the fewest fantasy points to running backs this year, so it's about as bad of a matchup as you can get. The Seahawks offense has already shifted to more of a pass-happy system, and if Carson does miss this game, I think we see Russell Wilson throw the ball 40 times easy. So I'm definitely staying away from these running backs. I know Carlos Hyde was a big target for the waiver wire this week, but I didn't put in any tickets for him. DK Metcalf had a pretty disappointing game, only 2 catches on 5 targets for 23 yards, but have no fear because he is a superhero, and if you ever need any reassurance to play DK Metcalf, just go back and watch him run down Budda Baker on that interception return. It was ridiculous. It's how these people are this fat. The dude is massive. Like, he's the size of an offensive lineman, and yet he's outrunning little defensive backs. DK got a little unlucky last week, too. He had that 50-yard touchdown catch and run called back on a holding call. But but he's still a start, obviously. Tyler Lockett had a pretty massive bounce-back game with 15 catches on 20 targets for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. It's a lot to say. 45 half PPR fantasy points. He's incredible. Made that insane one-handed catch over Patrick Peterson. Scored on Patrick Peterson twice, actually. So we're obviously starting those two dudes. The 49ers continue to be hit with the injury bug. Raheem Mostert is out for another few games. Jeff Wilson looks like he's going to miss, I think I've heard 3 to 4 weeks. He had a pretty solid game against the Patriots last week until he got hurt. Tevin Coleman could be, I think he's ready to return in this game against the Seahawks, but who knows how much work he'll really get coming off the IR. You still got Jerick McKinnon there, but I think he had 15 touches over the last 3 games. So the running back that you want to play this week for the 49ers and possibly for the next couple weeks is definitely JaMycal Hasty. He had over 6 yards per carry last week, turned his only target into 16 yards. So I'm sure he's going to see an uptick in his targets on top of getting probably the lion's share of the carries. Hastie's should be a nice value play in DFS this week as well, with 4 running backs looking like they're going to suit up for this game. We all know how generous Kyle Shanahan's system is to running backs, so I would get that kid into my lineup. Deebo Samuel also got hurt last week. He will be out at least 2 weeks with an ankle injury. I hit on Deebo's reception prop last week. I know the Patriots were going to load up to try and stop George Kittle, and they did exactly that. He was still able to catch 5 balls, but they did somewhat hold him in check. But Deebo caught 5 passes as well. That his over-under was the over-under was 4.5, so I jumped on that. I think the rookie Brandon Ayuk is in line to have a big game here, though. 6 catches on 7 targets last week with 115 yards. He scored 2 rushing touchdowns on 4 carries this year as well. So with the state of the 49ers running back group, and maybe we see Ayuk get an increase in targets and a few extra carries in this game. The Seahawks have been one of the best matchups for wide receivers this year, so I will definitely be taking a look at pretty much all of Brandon Ayuk's props, receptions. I'll be looking at his rushing and receiving prop. FanDuel is pretty cool. They combine that together. I'm not sure if DraftKings does it, but we'll have to check it out. Next is the Saints at the Bears with no Michael Thomas or Emmanuel Sanders. The Saints still put up 27 points. Kamara got 24 touches. The Bears are a pretty tough run defense, but Kamara is obviously still a start. I thought Traquan Smith would see a bunch of targets last week. He ended up being 4th on the team in targets. Marquez Callaway caught 8 of his 10 targets and led the team in receiving yards with 75. Hopefully we get Michael Thomas back for this game, but if not, and no Emmanuel Sanders is still out, I think Callaway becomes a very interesting DFS play because he's going to cost nothing to get in your lineup. So take a look at him. David Montgomery has had some pretty tough matchups, and this one is not any easier. The Saints have allowed the 4th fewest rushing yards and the 5th fewest receiving yards to running backs, so I'm probably sitting him this week. Their offense just looks confused, and they look overpowered. They look very sloppy on Monday night. So, yeah, I'm sitting David Montgomery. Allen Robinson should be a good play. The Saints, I missed on his receptions prop last week. He only had 4 catches on 4 targets. I think his number was like 6.5. So I was wrong on that one. But the Saints are in the top 12 in fantasy points allowed, and they just got torched by DJ Moore last week for a pair of touchdowns. So I like Robinson to have a bounce-back game here. My favorite play in this game, though, is Jimmy Graham. The Saints have allowed the 2nd most fantasy points per game to tight ends this year. They've given up 6 touchdowns to tight ends already. Graham has the 2nd most red zone targets in the league. He will definitely be on my tight end touchdown scorer parlay, mainly because of the matchup, but also because revenge. He obviously made a name for himself down there in New Orleans. Next, we got the Cowboys at the Eagles. This game is tough because there's just so many injury question marks. Is Andy Dalton playing? Is it the 3rd stringer, Ben DiNucci? Is there really that much of a difference? I think we're all still starting Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. Gallup is definitely a sit either way. I think he's obviously the third man out. Zeke is still a start no matter what to me. If he's going to get 15 to 20 carries and 3 to 5 targets every week, you're still going to start him no matter what. Dalton Schultz has the best matchup. The Eagles have allowed the third most receptions and the fifth most receiving yards to tight ends, and they've given up 6 touchdowns to tight ends. So Schultz might make the tight end scorecard, but I want to see who's going to be starting at quarterback before I bet on it. And then even if I know who's starting at quarterback, I may not, because this Cowboys offense just looks pathetic. We don't know if Miles Sanders will be able to play. He's still questionable as of right now. Cowboys have allowed the 6th most fantasy points to running backs. However, they are really tough on running backs in the passing game. So whether it's Sanders or Boston Scott, I'm going to be looking at their under for receiving yards. Those two linebackers that the Cowboys have, they run sideline to sideline. They're fast as hell, and they can cover these running backs out of the backfield. So I'm definitely going to be taking a look at that. Travis Fulgham, I think, is still a good start in this game. He's had double-digit targets in 3 straight games now. Pretty sure I heard a stat today that he's the only player right now with an active streak of 3 games with double-digit targets. So that's pretty ridiculous. He had a handful of red zone targets last week, but just couldn't score. He's probably still their number 1 target. The Cowboys have allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to wide receivers. So Travis Fulgham should be pretty good. Richard Rodgers is another interesting tight end here. He's got a good matchup with the Cowboys, who are 8th in fantasy points allowed to tight ends. He caught 6 of his 8 targets last week for 85 yards. Carson Wentz loves throwing in these tight ends, and Richard Rodgers is, he's not a great tight end, but he's not bad either. So maybe an interesting, you build your DFS lineup this week and you wait at tight end, and you get lucky that Richard Rodgers is one of the cheaper guys. Buccaneers at the Giants. I think this is Monday Night Football. This is the last game. Sweet. We're only at 20 minutes. Excellent. Buccaneers at Giants. Unfortunately, I think Tampa Bay is on the verge of becoming just one massive headache. You got Leonard Fournette. He got some work last week for the first time since week 3. He and Ronald Jones basically split the carries, 11 for Fournette and 13 for Jones. Ronald Jones got the rushing touchdown halfway through the fourth quarter, but Fournette got 7 of the team's 9 running back targets. I have both of them in separate leagues, and I think I'm just going to start them both every week and just hope that they score. Of course, I have Fournette in the non-PPR league, and I have Jones in the full PPR league, which I wish it was the opposite, but that's just the way the crookie crumbles sometimes. The crookie, yeah. So hopefully, they both have more good games than bad, but it's going to be a huge headache just trying to figure out which guy's going to have a better game, which is why you should just start both of them. As far as the wide receivers go, let's just go down the list here for the Buccaneers. Mike Evans has been one of the most incredibly inconsistent players all year, mostly due to injuries, but still only 3 catches over the past 2 games yet. He's had 2 games this year with only 2 receiving yards, and he's had 2 games this year with over 100 receiving yards. He scored, I think, in the first 4 games, each of the first 4 games, and then he didn't score for 2 games. It's just ridiculous. He's on and off, on and off. Chris Godwin has a broken finger, and he's not going to play this week. Last week, Scotty Miller tied Chris Godwin for the team high in targets with 9. Miller has led the team in receiving yards, and he scored. Tyler Johnson also scored. Scotty Miller has been, along with Mike Gesicki, I think Scotty Miller has been the biggest thorn in my ass for fantasy football this year. Every week I start him, he does absolutely nothing, and every week that I don't start him, he scores double-digit fantasy points. Tyler Johnson's got a touchdown in 2 straight games now, with only 3 targets in those 2 games combined. So that's, it sucks that he was only getting 3 targets, but the fact that 2 of them were in the end zone is pretty cool. I don't know what to do here. I've gotten burned by Scotty Miller. Like I said, I got twice now. He's also extremely inconsistent, but week 6, he had those 2 targets. And then the following week, he had 9 targets. I guess with no Chris Godwin and with Mike Evans still dealing with a nagging ankle injury, Scotty Miller should see a healthy dose of targets. But again, he had 2 games this year with no Chris Godwin, and he only had 2 catches for 11 yards in the first game. Then he had no catches on no targets in the second game. So he and Tyler Johnson are definitely very risky, but they should both see the targets. I think honestly, I think I might be a little more comfortable with Ty Johnson, to be honest. Rob Gronkowski, he's back. Back-to-back games with touchdowns now and 8 targets in each of those 2 games. He looks like he's starting to come on. So if you need a tight end and Gronk is available, I think this is as good of a fill-in as you can ask for. The Giants aren't bad against tight ends, but if Brady and Gronk are starting to build back that chemistry a little bit, then Gronk could be the number 1 tight end in football. So I'd be willing to take that risk. And for the Giants, you're not starting any of the running backs because that defense is so good. And honestly, I think the only wide receiver or tight end that you could play from the Giants is maybe Darius Slayton, but honestly, I wouldn't even feel comfortable with that either. So here we go. Let's drop in these picks for Week 8. All right, the Week 8 podcast picks here. Last week was rough. 3-5-1 my picks were last week. It was my first losing week. Aaron Jones was one of my touchdown scorers, and he did not play, so I was kind of behind the 8 ball from the start, but we're still at 59% on the season. A hit on my Week 7 road dog with the Steelers winning outright, so 7-0 with the road dog picks now. 5 of the 7 have won outright, so if you've been tailing me on these road dog picks, you're making money. My goal is to finish this year over 60%, so I got to dig myself out here. So let's go with Week 8 picks. My first one is the Colts minus 2.5 at the Lions. The Colts are coming off their bye, with the Lions are coming off a crazy last-second comeback win against the Falcons, a game they should have lost, but Todd Gurley decided to score instead of take a knee on the 1-yard line. The Colts have by far the best offensive line in football, and head coach Frank Reich has said he wants to see more from his running game. The Lions have allowed the 7th most rushing yards per game. I think Indy comes out and runs the crap out of the ball. I think they win this game by 3 points easy. So my pick against the spread here is the Colts minus 2.5. The next one, Rams minus 3 at the Dolphins. Tua Tagovailoa will make his first start. A lot has been made of the Dolphins' decision to start him while the team is 3-3, and the veteran Ryan Fitzpatrick has been playing good. But Tua is the future. I think best case scenario for the Dolphins is 8-8, 9-7, even with Fitz at quarterback, which yes could make the playoffs this year, especially with that extra playoff spot. But are they really going to do anything in the playoffs? You know, they're going to go up and play Kansas City, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, or Tennessee in the first round. What's the point, right? So let Tua get in there, take his bumps, and then next year he comes. He starts the season and he comes out with a good 8 games under his belt. I think it's a good idea. The Rams D-line looked incredible last week against the Bears. I know the Bears offense is nothing spectacular, but Aaron Donald is the last guy you want lined up over your center in your first career start. Right now, the Bears are the only team to allow touchdowns to wide receivers. Screwed that stat up. Right now, the Bears are the only team to allow fewer touchdowns to wide receivers than the Rams. So the Rams are second in touchdowns allowed to wide receivers, and they've allowed the second fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. So I don't expect much from the passing game of Miami. Miami is they're in the middle of the pack as far as rushing yards allowed per game. The Rams have rushed for the 7th most yards per game, so I think that's a big mismatch in this game. I think Darrell Henderson has a good game, and the Rams win. I would buy this game down to 2.5, so you only need the 1 field goal. It will cost you, between 20 and 30 cents in value, which is significant, but I think it's worth it here because I do think it's going to be a tight game. All right, and the last pick here, the Titans minus 5.5 at the Bengals. This one's pretty easy to me. We got the Bengals allowing the 4th most rushing yards per game right now. They just lost 2 of their starting offensive linemen. The Bengals O-line wasn't all that great to begin with, and now they got 2 guys down, so I think it's significantly worse. I think it's a long day for Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati offense. I think the Titans get back on track after their first loss of the season last week. Derrick Henry runs wild over the Bengals, so give me the Titans -5.5, sorry, to round out my 3 picks against the spread here. If you were to parlay those 3 picks together, should get you around 470 plus 475, so that's about $95 on a $20 bet. Not too shabby. My over for week 8, the over. I'm going with the Vikings at the Packers, over 50.5. This game has it hit 77 total points in week 1. Both of the top running backs on each team are returning from missing a game because of injury. But besides that, nothing has really changed for either team. Green Bay averages 32.8 points per game. Minnesota is at 25.8 points a game. Minnesota allows 32 points per game, so pretty much right on track with what the Packers score. And Green Bay allows 26.5 points a game, about 1 point more than what Minnesota scores. So even if each team puts up 2 less points than they do on average, that number of 51 should still hit for our over. So I like Minnesota at Green Bay over 50.5. The Colts at the Lions are going to be my under. It's at 50 right now. The Colts have a really good defense. Granted, they've had a pretty easy schedule so far this year. They're coming off their bye. As I said earlier, the Lions' run D is not great, so I think they give the ball to Jonathan Taylor a good 25 times this game, and they just grind out a slow, boring win, low-scoring game. I'm honestly pretty surprised that the game is at 50 right now. I see this as a 24-17 game, 27-21 at very most. So yeah, give me the Colts at the Lions under 50 points. My touchdown scorer props for this week are going to be Devontae Adams. Adams has either a touchdown or over 100 receiving yards in his last 7 games against the Vikings. He absolutely torched them in week 1. I think Rodgers dices up that young Vikings secondary again this week. I've never bet a guy to score 2 touchdowns, but I might consider it this week with Devontae Adams because I think he's just going to keep having himself a jolly old time against the Minnesota Vikings. My next guy to score a touchdown in week 8, Derrick Henry. You pretty much bet Derrick Henry to score every single week, and you'll finish the season up, I bet. But I think this is going to be a very ugly game, and I think King Henry is going to just dominate the Bengals, so I think Henry scores easy. Travis Kelce is the number 3 guy for me. In week 2, the Jets let Jordan Reed score twice, who was sitting on the couch watching the NFL in week 1. Then in week 5, they gave up touchdowns to both Adam Shaheen and Durham Smythe. If the Jets struggle to cover those dudes, Travis Kelce should have a pretty good game, I would say. He's another guy I might seriously consider to take for 2 touchdowns. So all we got left here is the Road Dog of the Week.
Oh, you didn't know? Your ass better call somebody.
So this week is really tough with the Road Dog of the Week. I'm 7-0. I really want to keep this streak alive, but like I said, this week just really sucks. I'm going to run down the list of Road Dogs as of right now on Thursday night. Almost every Road Dog this week is a division game, which was interesting to me. The Falcons are plus 1.5 right now at the Panthers. I'm recording as I'm watching. Curtis Samuel just scored his 2nd touchdown, I believe, which is great. But the Falcons at the Panthers, the Road Dog I like the best actually this week was the Falcons getting points at the Panthers. I actually have the Falcons in a little same game parlay for this Thursday night game with Todd Gurley's over on rushing yards, Calvin Ridley to score, and Robbie Anderson's over 78.5 receiving yards. But I don't want to use it as my Road Dog play because by the time you guys and gals listen to this episode, the Thursday night game will have already been played. So I got to find a different game. So here's the list. The Raiders are getting 2.5 at the Browns. Don't like that one. Vikings are getting 5.5 at the Packers. You'd have to give me at least 10.5 to take the Vikings. The Patriots are getting 3.5 at the Bills. This one I had circled earlier in the week when the Patriots were getting 4 points. I would take this one if Cam wasn't playing like complete garbage, but this one just makes me nervous, so I don't know what to do there. The Steelers are getting 3.5 at the Ravens. I don't want to have any money on this game because I want to just sit back and watch it. I have no clue what's going to happen, so that's the game I'm probably most excited about this week. We got the 49ers getting 2.5 at the Seahawks. I think these NFC West games are some of the hardest games to handicap. I think the Seahawks win, but I don't know if it's by 1 point or by 10 points, so I can't take this one. You got the Cowboys getting 8.5 at the Eagles. I really wanted to use this one because I think 8.5 is a lot to get in a division game with both teams are really not all that great. The Cowboys are coming off that embarrassing loss to Washington. Eagles stole a game from the Giants last Thursday night. If Dalton was playing this game, I might be the slightest bit more comfortable taking the Cowboys getting 8.5, but honestly, who cares which Dallas quarterback starts? The offensive line is complete garbage right now. They are not what they once were at all. And then there's the New York Football Jets getting 19.5 at the Chiefs. I'm a Jets fan, and I don't even trust the Jets getting 20 points. So, there's that whole Le'Veon Bell revenge situation. It's just a gross situation to be in. I cannot hitch my 7-0 road dog of the week wagon to the freaking New York Football Jets. So I guess I'm going to go with the Patriots getting 3.5 at the Bills. I hate to do it, but besides that Thursday night game, I don't like any of these road dogs. When in doubt, bet on something that's never happened before, right? Bill Belichick leading a team after 3 straight losses. I doubt that's ever happened with the Patriots. Probably never happened when he was working under Bill Belichick or Bill Parcells with the Giants. And I doubt, maybe it happened with the Browns. Who knows? Josh Allen and the Bills have not looked all that great over the past few weeks. Like I mentioned earlier, the Bills have 0 running game right now. If Stephon Gilmore can lock down Stephon Diggs, and if they can keep John Brown from getting behind the defense, hold that fleet of tight ends that the Bills have. I think they have like 4 different tight ends that have scored a touchdown this year. If they can force Josh Allen to make accurate throws, I know the Patriots defense is not what it once was. It's not what it was last year by any means, but Josh Allen is 0-3, I'm pretty sure, against the Patriots in his career. I like the fact that we're getting 3 points and the hook, so even if a late field goal were to go down for the Bills, we should still cover here. So, you know what? Whatever. Screw it. Let's go with the freaking Patriots getting 3.5 points for the road dog of Week 8. And that's going to do it for the Week 8 Kickin' or Stickin' Fantasy Football Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I think we're still over a half hour, of course, but I'm sorry. Should only be a couple minutes over a half hour. But make sure you check us out next week, where we'll be doing it all over again. So thanks again, and may the fantasy gods be cruel to your opponents.
You have been listening to the Kickin' or Stickin' Fantasy Football Podcast. For more great episodes and information, follow us on social media and tune in every week. Kickin' or Stickin' is available on Google Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Alexa, Reach.tv, or your favorite podcast service. Kickin' or Stickin' is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. To find out more about this and other great shows on our network, visit us online at hcuniversalnetwork.com today. Fantasy football is fun, but gambling addiction destroys lives. If you or someone you love suffers from gambling addiction, please do not be afraid to seek help. The National Council on Problem Gambling operates the National Problem Gambling Helpline Network. Contact them today at 1-800-522-4700. Thank you for tuning in to the Kickin' or Stickin' Fantasy Football Podcast. Please remember to play responsibly and always look for your man downfield.
At Toyota, we set our sights on creating a car that looks good, feels good, but does even more good. One that feels even more exciting, even more energetic, even more electric, without ever needing to be plugged in. Challenge accepted. The all-new self-charging hybrid electric Yaris. Contact your dealer today about flexible payment options and see just how affordable the new Yaris is. Toyota. Built for a better world.
Fist popping, got your mouth dropping, super tongue shocking, feel the taste rocking. Head first, flavor burst, hit him with that max taste to free your thirst. So let's go. Ice cold, taste the bold, burning liver, shiver, giving, gotta love some Pepsi Max.
In a blind taste test against the biggest selling cola, we won. Maximum taste, no sugar.